Good evening, everyone, and welcome to session 2 of the TomRichey.net 8-month writing clinic. Now, this is going to focus on using documents. Now, this is our second broadcast for October because the other broadcast focused on AP US history. This is going to specifically focus on AP European history using a DBQ that I created along with Jennifer Banowitz, who I think is actually joining us this evening. And we're going to look at that DBQ, and I'm going to show you how I would go about using documents. Now, remember that the one rubric to rule them all is available on my website at tomrichey.net. So if you want that, go ahead and look for that. If you look for AP Euro DBQ rubric on Google, you'll find it. Now, we are going to be focusing on how to score 2 of the 3 document points this time. All right. So this is going to, we've got 3 points. Now, the other one we're going to save because it's a more advanced skill. When we think about like POV analysis, HIP analysis, all of that, what we're going to be focusing on this time is, first of all, accurately describes the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Quotes are insufficient to earn this point. Now, remember, never quote a document. Now, unless you are very briefly quoting it, you couldn't say it better yourself. But remember that the reader knows what the documents say. The reader is painfully aware after reading the same essay topic for a whole week. They are painfully aware of what's there. And when you quote, you don't demonstrate understanding. So all this point is essentially showing that you understand the document's content, really that you can read and understand what you read. I'm going to go over very quickly how to do that. And there's also going to be a supplemental video about, going over describing the documents. Now, then this is really going to be the focus of tonight's broadcast, because just about anyone can accurately describe the content of at least 3 documents. The other point here is supports an argument in response to the prompt using at least 6 documents. These documents should meet and exceed the standard set for this description point. So the good news is here that if you support 6, you also describe 3. So when we look at these as 2 points, that's not really, not really 2 points you're getting. You're really trying to support the argument. And in doing so, you're going to mention the documents. You're going to know what it says, because you can't use a document to support an argument if you don't understand what it says. So that's really the, going to be the big focus this evening. And as far as that goes, I had an animation just to need a fix real quick. All right, and there we go. Okay, ladies and all right, ladies and gentlemen. So let's note here that we will have another session later on that's going to focus on document explanation analysis, your HIP, POV, SAP, all of that stuff. So I've marked analysis. What I'm going to do when I write this stuff, I'll put my analysis here, and we'll work on that more in particular and model that in another session, because what we're really focusing on is, getting the points one by one and making sure that, if we can get students to get 3 or 4 points on this, they're on their way to passing the exam. And in the spring, we're going to work on the more advanced skills. So let's worry about what we need to do to make a 3, and then we'll worry about what we need to do to make a 4 or a 5. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this DBQ prompt. Evaluate the extent to which the invention of the printing press altered the lives of Europeans. Now, of course, as a DBQ prompt, you're putting different thinking skills together. It's not like the LEQ where you've got one thinking skill. There's a bit of causation here. There is a bit of continuity and change over time. A bit of the old periodization that's not on the LEQs anymore. But the printing press comes along to evaluate the extent. Now, this is a very popular way for prompts to begin, because when you evaluate the extent, you are saying, okay, it's going to be somewhere between 100% and 0%, and thinking about how was this how influential was this and how big of a change was it? And then how much continuity was there as a result? And so when we're looking at this now, the biggest thing that I recommend when students are writing a DBQ, because in order to use the documents to support an argument, it has to be organized. Okay. So for the describes point, document one says this, document four says this, document six says this. And this is something that you don't have to be organized for that. But to support an argument, you're really going to have to write an organized essay. And that's why I recommend putting the documents into three groups. Well, what if I can't get the documents into three groups? Well, these things are intentionally written so that documents can be grouped together. So any DBQ that you look at, you're going to find like every document has another document that can be put into conversation with it. So we're going under the assumption when we go into the DBQ that we are going to be able to separate the documents into three groups. And I'm going to model how I would go about doing that with these 7 documents. And remember, we're going to use all 7 of them because we don't want to take any chances. So our prompt is about the printing press. How did it alter the lives of Europeans? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at document 1, which is by someone familiar, Petrarch. All right, so Petrarch, Italian poet and man of letters, letter to Boccaccio, 1366. To be sure, the Latin in both prose and poetry is undoubtedly the nobler language, but for that very reason, it has been so thoroughly developed by earlier writers that neither we nor anyone else may expect to add very much to it. The vernacular, on the other hand, has but recently been discovered, and though it has been ravaged by many, it still remains uncultivated in spite of a few earnest laborers and still shows itself capable of much improvement and enrichment. Okay, so, basically, I would note here that Petrarch is not impressed with vernacular literature. Okay. Basically with the quality. All right. So with the quality of vernacular literature. Now, if you want to write in some kind of shorthand, that works too. But I'm making a note here that, there's Petrarch. Now, as far as that goes, his POV is the father of humanism. We'll put that. Now, we're going to address that in another video. But just so you can see how I'd go about annotating documents. Okay. So I would put here that I'm going to use POV. I'll talk about his, status as the father of humanism when I get into that. So he's not impressed with the state of vernacular literature. Stimulated by this thought and the enterprises of youth, I began an extensive work in that language. I laid the foundations of the structure, and then I began to consider a little more carefully the times in which we live, the fact that our age is the mother of pride and indolence, and that the ability of the vainglorious fellows who would be my judges and their peculiar grace of delivery is such that they can hardly be said to recite the writings of others, but rather to mangle them. Hearing their performances again and again and turning the matter over in my mind, I concluded at length that I was building upon unstable earth and shifting sand and should simply waste my labors and see the work of my hands leveled by the common herd. Okay, so when it comes down to it, he is not, he's not impressed with the state of vernacular literature. We can note here that this is before. Okay, so when we see 1366, I would note here that this is before the printing press. Okay, so and we could even think about that as contextualization. And something that a student should know if we're thinking about this is before the printing press, not impressed with the quality of vernacular literature. At least in Petrarch's opinion, there aren't many good writers out there. We see here that, we could think about the printing press and literacy. Okay, so when I annotate, I might even think about what are some ideas that I can bring in here. Okay, so when we think about this, describes the content of the document. Okay, so what we would note here is in a letter to Boccaccio, Petrarch, lamented or I'll use a more simple word there, Petrarch. Let's see, Petrarch, expressed his disgust with the state of vernacular literature. Okay, noting that there were not many good, people who could write well. Okay, in the vernacular. Okay. And so what we could do here, so describes the content. Now, if we're looking for supports an argument, okay, now how would we use this to support an argument? Then we would say here that writing before the printing press, okay, so the printing press, Petrarch noted the sad state of vernacular literature. Okay, before the printing press, literacy in Europe was limited to a select few, and very few people wrote well in the vernacular. Okay, so wrote well in the vernacular. So when I see this, what I'm noting here, and I'm using this to support an argument, and this is what I'm already seeing, and this is where we start to think about, okay, what could we do here? I'm going to think in terms of, let's go ahead and paste our T chart here, maybe an increase in literacy, okay? A rise in literacy. I'm just going to put rise here because that's going to fit better. Okay, so a rise in literacy, and I'm going to put document 1. Okay, so you've got here Petrarch. Okay, this Petrarch document I could use, and that's something that is in the concept outline. That is something that students are supposed to know. So remember here that our groups, like the DBQ, is really not going to expect students to come up with things out of the blue or know anything that wouldn't be appropriate. Would be beyond what a student should know in a survey level course. And so when we look at this document, we see here we can describe the document's content, or we can say, look, we are, actually using the document to make an argument, and you want to know what is that argument that you are trying to support. So far here, we've got a point. Now, we may have to edit that. If I don't see any other documents that are noting a rise in literacy, unless I've got some good outside information to go with it, and I want to do 2 groups of 3, I wouldn't necessarily go with that. I might let this evolve into something else. But for right now, and it's very important for students to be thinking about where they're going as they go through the documents. You notice here that I've got a section here that I call pairing notes. And what I do here is I look at, what are some documents that this could successfully pair with? And so document 2, we've got the sentence against Jan Hus, the Council of Constance. Now, before we do that, let me check the chat room real quick and see what we've got here, if anybody's got any questions or anything like that. Okay, so we've got this okay, from LA. Let's see. So is that Michael? Is that LA, California? Hopefully so. I mean, I hope that I'm not taken away from the Dodgers game. And let's just check on that real quick. All right, Dodgers 1-0. Okay, so sorry about that, Cubs fans. All right, so don't see any questions yet. Now, if there are questions, remember, put them in the chat. Or if you're a VIP subscriber, remember just to come on in. If you're listening and you're a VIP subscriber, you've got the link to actually ask me your question via video. All right. So as far as oh gosh, yeah, I didn't make Jordan too happy with that score announcement. All right. Sorry, not sorry. All right. Let's go ahead and keep going through the documents. Now, before I do that, though, if I think about it, an advanced AP Euro student, when they're thinking about how did the printing press alter daily life, in the lives of Europeans, you're thinking, first of all, the increase in literacy. Second of all, a causal influence in the Reformation. Third of all, a causal influence in the scientific revolution. Well, it's not going to be too surprising that the documents are all going to fall into place. And that's typically what these documents do. They fall into place predictably, along the lines of what are AP European history students supposed to know. And so as far as that goes, let's go back to our main presentation. All right. So what we've got here is sentence against Jan Hus, Council of Constance, 1415. Now, once again, this is, we know about, Jan Hus, the heretic. Students should, have some kind of, the most advanced students, the students that are going to make a 5, should have at least, they should recognize this guy. Okay. But once again, this is, pre printing press. Okay. So we're noting, and that could also be a, POV or whatever. Okay. So, but we see the Council of Constance. We see the POV is the Catholic Church, passing a sentence on a heretic. Okay. So we've got that. Now, the most holy general council of Constance, divinely assembled and representing the Catholic Church for an everlasting record, since the bad tree is wont to bear bad fruit. As truth itself testifies, so is that John Wycliffe. Now, notice sometimes you'll see in the documents an explanatory note. And since John Wycliffe is somebody who is before the scope of this course, even earlier than Jan Hus, I believe he was a 14th century, churchman. So there would be a little explanatory note. You'd see here, 14th century English priest and theologian who criticized many Catholic doctrines and practices. So I know what I need to know about John Wycliffe. Of cursed memory, by his deadly teaching, like a poisonous root, has brought forth many noxious sons, not in Jesus Christ through the gospel, but rather contrary to the saving faith of Christ, and that he has left these sons as successors to his perverse teaching. Okay, so dangerous heresies, okay, are spreading. Okay, that's what we get here. I like to annotate. I'm a big fan, especially since there's going to be a little bit more time on the DBQ. I don't imagine the kids really need to spend any more time on the LEQ than they've spent in the past. And so I think that kids have a solid hour 10 to spend on the DBQ, and save 30 minutes for the LEQ unless it's a topic that's especially favorable. All right. And so, I was actually having Chicago style, pizza in Chicago a couple days ago with Miss Banowitz and her family. And we were talking about how the LEQ really, in a lot of cases, when you look at the allocations and what's required to do it, it's not the best of investments. The DBQ is really where you want to place that time. So that's why I'm a big fan of annotations. And so we look here, the Holy Synod of Constance is compelled to act against these men as against spurious and illegitimate sons, basically heretics or bastards here, and to cut away their errors from the Lord's field as if they were harmful briars by means of vigilant care and the knife of ecclesiastical authority, lest they spread as a cancer to destroy others. Although, therefore, it was decreed. Now, here's the thing, too. I'm going on and reading. Now, if I'm somebody who already knows what happened to Jan Hus and I see what's going on here, okay, spoiler alert, they're going to burn him, okay? And so the thing is, don't necessarily feel like you have to read every word of this in order to use the document. Once I've got this, because I can even put here that I've got some, insight on the historical situation. Hus is burned as a heretic. Okay, so Hus is burned as a heretic. So we've got that. And so as far as that goes, we see here what's going on. I feel like I've read enough and I can use this document. So we see here that the Council of Constance is condemning Jan Hus as a heretic. Once you get what's going on, there's really no need to keep reading, okay? Now, the thing is, I'm just going to bank on there being another Reformation document, okay? So we're going to note the, Hus, and we're going to note this is before, okay? And, making some little notes here, like Petrarch is a before document. Okay, so Hus and Petrarch were both dealing with before the printing press. Now let's take a look at document 3. William Tyndale, English theologian and reformer, the practice of prelates, 1530. Well, wait, here we go. All right, we see pair with document 2, or if you're in a hurry, just with document 2 will be fine, or just doc 2 or the number 2 or anything like that. So we can see here that this is something, and let's see, I actually like to keep this going so somebody can use this presentation. So as far as this goes, what we've got here, all right. Let's see. What we've got here is another Reformation document. Okay. So we're going to note that. All right. And so, we see here we've got with document 2. So we can see that these are going to both be Reformation documents. They say that Peter was chief of the apostles, verily, as Apelles was called chief of painters, for this excellent cunning, or for his excellent cunning above others. Even so, Peter may be called chief of the apostles for his activity and boldness above the others, but that Peter had any authority or rule over his brethren and fellow apostles is false and contrary to the scripture. Christ forbade it the last, even before his passion, and in diverse times before, and taught always the contrary. Now, what I'm going to do here when I'm annotating, I'm going to note here, this is POV. This is a reformer. Okay, so William Tyndale was a reformer, and also the situation is papal authority. Okay, so I would note that if I want to give some background into the document, but I'm going to note here what he's doing. Okay, so Tyndale is challenging the Pope's authority. Okay, so now notice here, there's nothing in here that mentions the Pope. So basically, what's happened here is the document has been selected and it's being intentionally vague so that somebody who who does not understand European history can't really use it for much of anything. But we see here now another thing I want to note here is that I might make a note of the scripture. Okay, so we see here that he is using scripture. Okay. And we see that there has been a bit of an intervening event. Okay. That we see here, 1530. This is, after Martin Luther's 95 Theses. And, as far as that goes, this is after the invention of the printing press. Okay. So we see that the printing press has been invented by this time. Okay. So the thing is, we see that the printing press has been invented. So he's using scripture. This is typical of a Protestant. Okay. So, I could note here, I could go into, this guy is Protestant. And so we're going to get into more of that in another broadcast. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to note that we've got Tyndale, okay, who is now using the printing press to spread the Reformation. And now another thing I want to note here is that we have a gap, okay, and they're going to leave intentional gaps here. And we've got another session where we'll focus on outside information and using that effectively. But Martin Luther is the big gap here that Luther's not mentioned. And typically the gap is going to be something fairly obvious. Most DBQs, all DBQs have gaps because they want you to use outside information. So when I'm looking through here, I'm going to note here that Martin Luther, okay, so Martin Luther, 95 Theses. Now, remember, we'll talk about this in that session that, we're going to talk about how to use evidence, but Martin Luther is going to be, really the clincher here as far as, that's outside information that I can use here. And that's going to be very important when we're thinking about putting that in. But I think that it's important for students to go ahead and, as you're pre-writing, go ahead and decide what your outside information is. So we're separating the thinking and the writing process here. All right. And so as far as that goes, now we've got 2 documents for the Reformation. And so then we see here, every DBQ will have some sort of visual source, whether that be a chart, whether it be a a map, whether it be a painting or a work of art or a drawing like this. Now, the thing is, what we see here is Andreas Vesalius. Now, an advanced student would be able to say, okay, I know who that is. So, Flemish anatomist and physician. De Humani Corporis Fabrica, 1543. Okay, so as far as that goes, what I would note here is that we've got the situation here is the scientific revolution. Okay, so we've got that. And then I might even note here that the title is still in Latin. Okay, so the title in Latin, because I could possibly note that, the printing press didn't necessarily change, that, most, published works continue to be written in Latin, although vernacular literature certainly developed. Okay, so the thing is that, before the scientific revolution, we see here, now this is where we should know that, what's going on here in the, dissection. Okay, that basically, Vesalius is dissecting cadavers. Okay, so we see that, this is a dissected human body. Okay, this was illegal at the time. Okay, so this was illegal at the time. And so basically, we see that things are being challenged. So with this, we have a document having to do with the scientific revolution. And this is something that if we're thinking about this, this is something that is pretty intuitive. Okay, so we've got so far Reformation, and then we've got document 4 with this with this visual document and making a direct reference here. Okay, so a dissected human body. This was illegal at the time. Showing details of the muscular structure. Okay, so we've got that now. So now we've got some things here. So we've got that T chart set up there. I keep forgetting to make new things here, but that's okay. So we've got Vesalius there that we're going to use for that. Okay, so we've got Vesalius that we use for this one. All right, and so now we've got 3 categories. Now we might have to edit them, but as I go, I'm going to continue to do that. And so document 5, the Council of Trent. Now, of course, this is, POV, Catholic Church. And then I think, you know what? I think I already read an art, a document by the Catholic Church, and I just go up there to see which one was that again. Okay, that was Jan Hus in document 2. So what I'm going to note here is with document 2. Okay, so we've got the Council of Trent. And so we will note here that document 5 is going to be our 3rd document of the Reformation. Now, as far as that goes, remember that we are, as far as that goes, you want to make sure that you don't put 4 documents in a group, because that's going to be hard to do. So if you ever find yourself, with 4 documents in a group, your categories are getting too broad, divide that into 2 groups of 2. So what we've got here for the Reformation, I've got 3 documents, plus I can bring in Martin Luther. And so when we look at the Council of Trent, okay, so we see this, the POV, the Catholic Church, you've got the situation here is the Counter-Reformation. And once again, we'll talk about how to effectively use this information later on. So the books of these heresiarchs, who after the aforesaid year originated or revived heresies, as well as of those who are or have been in the heads or leaders of heretics, whatever may be their name, title, or nature of their heresy, are absolutely forbidden. The books of other heretics, so basically, the books of heretics, books written by heretics, are forbidden. Okay. And what we can note here as well is it seems like the publication of books must be a problem. Okay. So publication, it's getting harder. to control what is published. Okay, the Catholic Church is kind of panicking here. The books of other heretics, however, which deal professedly with religion, are absolutely condemned. Those, on the other hand, which do not deal with religion and have, by order of bishops and inquisitors, been examined by Catholic theologians and approved by them, are permitted. Likewise, Catholic books written by those who afterwards fell into heresy, as well as by those who after their fall returned to the bosom of the church, may be permitted if they have been approved by the theological faculty of a Catholic university or by the General Inquisition. Okay, so we see here that the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church is still, unbending in, asserting control of doctrine. Okay. So, and we could bring in the Counter Reformation and some, some of the situation there. So, as far as that is concerned, we've got that document that's going to be used there. Now, what I could see here is we've got an opportunity to use document 2 and document 5 actually to illustrate some continuity, that it certainly has not changed the Catholic Church's attitude. Okay, so we're noting here that it's the same mentality as what we saw earlier. Now, of course, the Inquisition is even mentioned. Somebody could bring that in and note what's going on there. All right, so then going on to document 6, Sir Francis Bacon, English scientist and philosopher, preface to Novum Organum 1620. All right. So those now, of course, there we kind of know where this is going. We've got another scientific revolution document. So those who have taken upon them to lay down the law of nature as a thing already searched out and understood, whether they have spoken in simple assurance or professional affectation, have therein done philosophy and the sciences great injury. For as they have been successful in inducing belief, so they have been effective in quenching and stopping inquiry, and have done more harm by spoiling and putting an end to other men's efforts than good by their own. Those, on the other hand, who have taken a contrary course and asserted that absolutely nothing can be known, whether it were from a hatred of the ancient sophist or from uncertainty and fluctuation of mind, or even from the kind of fullness of learning that they fell upon this opinion, have certainly advanced reasons for it that are not to be despised. But yet they have neither started from true principles nor rested in the just conclusion, zeal and affectation having carried them much too far. The more ancient of the Greeks, whose writings are lost, took up with better judgment a position between these two extremes, between the presumption of pronouncing on everything and the despair of comprehending anything. Now, note here that we've got, a bit of humanism, okay, that he is, looking to the Greeks. The Greeks were the best, okay? Now, we also see here that, we know deal, but there is still much to learn. Okay, we can note here that the scientific revolution, is expanding knowledge. Okay, thanks to the printing press. Okay, so we are in a situation where there are a lot of things going on here. Okay, so the POV here is from a natural philosopher, a scientist. Okay, and of course, when we think about the pairing notes, we've got document 4, which was the Vesalius document, which is going to be what we're going to put here. All right, so now we're going to note that. So with doc 4 is what we've got here. All right, so as far as that goes, we've got document 6, and that is Francis Bacon. Okay, so we're going to put him into there, and we're going to note we can use both of these documents to make the argument that learning is progressing at a rate beyond which it had progressed in a very, very long time. Now, you're probably speaking of the scientific revolution. We can note a gap here. Copernicus and Galileo. All right. So what's happened here is they've never been mentioned in these documents. Okay. So when we're thinking about this, I would note here we've got and Copernicus and Galileo. All right, so we can note that that's going on there. Okay, so we've got another thing there. Now, so when we look at William Harvey, the English physician, preface on the motion of the heart and blood, 1628. Okay, so once again, this is going to look like a basically the POV, and this is going to be a scientist, right, a physician. Okay, and we'll talk about how to use that later. Most illustrious prince. Okay, now the thing is, we could also note, absolutism and the way the royal academies, were put into practice to help with the scientific revolution. So I'm noting that. To the most illustrious and indomitable Prince Charles, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith. Most illustrious Prince, the heart of animals is the foundation of their life, the sovereign of everything within them, the sun of their microcosm that upon all growth depends, from which all power proceeds. The king, in like manner, is the foundation of his kingdom, the sun of the world around him, the heart of the republic, the fountain whence all power, all grace doth flow. What I have here written of the motions of the heart, I am more emboldened to present your majesty according to the customs of the present age. Now, what I'm going to note here, I mean, there's already been a nod to royal absolutism, right? So the king is at the center, okay? So the king is at the center. Now, we can also note that, that Harvey is flattering a patron. Okay, that might be something we might want to think about when we get into POV. So we're seeing that going on there. The knowledge of this heart, therefore, will not be useless to a prince as embracing a kind of divine example of his functions, and it has still been usual with men to compare small things with great. Here at all levels, best of princes, placed as you are on the pinnacle of human affairs, you may at once contemplate the prime mover in the body of man and the emblem of your own sovereign power. Okay, so we see here that basically, here we see that somebody, in authority is actually patronizing the arts. Okay, so we can go into here and that this is being supported. Okay, not the arts, but the sciences. Okay, so basically, we see here, and we can kind of, even though we'd probably put this in a different paragraph, although the church may not have been supporting innovations, we could see here that, absolutists, that monarchs are supporting, supporting scientific study. Okay, and so we can see that. All right, and so as far as that goes, now my first instinct would be to put document 7 in with this. Now I can do a 3, 3, and 1. So I can go in here and I can note document 7. I can note something about William Harvey. Okay, so now, another thing I could do, because remember, there are different ways somebody could set these up. There's a little bit of leeway here. When I see here that had been effective in quenching and stopping inquiry, have done more harm spoiling. Those who've taken a contrary course assert absolutely can be known. What we see here is that, knowledge is advancing, things are being printed and all of that kind of stuff. And also, since he's relying on humanism here, I may say, you know what, I actually think I want to pair that with document 1 now that I think about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually move document 6. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm going to put Bacon here. I'm going to put as far as like the rise in literacy. Let's go ahead and use that document 6. Now I could use document 6 here, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in italics. Okay, now I could use it both places. I don't get credit for using 2 documents. Okay, so if I wanted to, I've got some flexibility here as far as how to use this Bacon document, because he's basically writing that, look, learning, I mean, what you see here is learning is actually advancing a great deal. Okay, so as far as that goes, let me see if we have some questions here before I put together the, the skeletons of the body paragraphs that we'll be using for future sessions. Okay, doesn't look like there's a lot of discussion here. Let's see what's going on with the game here, just real quick. All right, let's go. Let's go Dodgers. All right, so you've got a question. Okay, teacher has noticed that our argument should have evidence directly from the documents. Should we write information provided in the documents or summarize the info? Yeah, the thing is that there needs to be, Michael, there needs to be a reference to something in the box. All right. That's really what we're going for here, is that something in the box has to be referenced. All right. So you want to make a very clear reference. And I think I'm about to answer your question, so that you'll see this modeled out in front of you. Okay. So let's go ahead and get to that. All right. So let's see what we've got here. And we're going to share the screen again. All right. So as far as that goes, all right. So if we were going to look at, let's see. All right. If we were going to look at body paragraph 1, okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to note documents 1 and 6. Okay. So I'm going to use documents 1 and 6 here. And so I'm going to be using these documents in order to create a paragraph that is making an argument. Okay, so as far as this goes, let me go ahead and put this here. All right, so as far as this body paragraph number 1, what I'm going to do here is the printing press resulted in a massive increase in literacy and learning in Europe. Okay, so literacy and learning in Europe. And so what I'm going to do here is Petrarch, that's my topic sentence. We've got this Petrarch document. I'm going to look back, and since I've got it annotated, I see that Petrarch was writing to Boccaccio. He was not impressed, okay, with the state of vernacular literature. Okay, so Petrarch, I'm going to note here, Petrarch, father of humanism. So pepper it with stuff, the father of humanism, noted in a letter to Boccaccio, that he was not impressed with the state of vernacular literature. Okay. He was not impressed with the state of, okay, yeah, Italian names can be tough. All right. He was not impressed with the state of vernacular literature in the days before the printing press. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is document 1. Now, I'm using this document to further an argument. Now, of course, I'm going to explain, so I'm going to explain the document later. Okay. Or I'm going to present my further analysis. Okay. I still like to use the term analysis, but anyway, so as far as that goes, I'm going to put my analysis in this section here, and we're going to add that later on. So he was not impressed with the state of vernacular literature. So what we see here is that I'm using it, but I'm going to be using it in order to advance an argument saying that there was an increase in literacy and learning throughout Europe. Okay, so so vernacular literature, and what I'm going to note here, what I would note here, demonstrating, okay, I like this better, demonstrating that, literacy and learning, were not widespread in the days before the printing press. Okay. So what I could see here, I would give some analysis there later on. Now, going to the Bacon document. Okay. So that's going to be the other document that I'm going to use here. And I'm going to choose to use it here to make that more of a thing. And so that's document 6. And I see here that, they've been effective in quenching and stopping inquiry, done more harm, spoiling, and putting. Okay. So what we see here is that, after the printing press. Okay. So, and note, I'm using these documents, I'm bending them to do what I want them to do. There's not just one way. This is not a true or false, yes or no. So what we see here now, of course, so we've got Bacon is writing, just to make sure we're clear on that. He's writing in 1620. Okay, so writing a few centuries later. Okay, so a few centuries after Petrarch, Francis Bacon, noted that a lot of noted that a lot was being learned and a lot was left to be discovered. Okay, was a lot was left to be discovered. Now, writing a few centuries after Petrarch, now we see here document 6. Okay, now then we could note here that Bacon's command, of classical studies. Okay, of classical studies that were championed by Petrarch. Okay, demonstrates that the state, that let's see, so demonstrates, yes, his command of classical studies that were championed by Petrarch demonstrates that the printing press was instrumental in furthering learning in Europe. Okay, so we could see that. Okay, so what I'm noting here, and I've put these documents into conversation with each other, which is one of the things that we would get for that complex understanding point, that I'm making these documents talk back and forth. And so with that, I could even put in some further. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I got a tutoring client there that I'm seeing after I finish here. All right. Okay, so as far as that goes, we would add some analysis there. But this is basically the skeleton of what I would put in there. So the printing press resulted in a massive increase in literacy and learning in Europe. Petrarch, the father of humanism, noted in a letter to Boccaccio that he was not impressed with the state of vernacular literature, demonstrating that literacy and learning were not widespread in the days before the printing press. Doc 1. Then I'll throw in some analysis. Writing a few centuries after Petrarch, Francis Bacon noted that a lot was being learned and a lot was left to be discovered. Bacon's command of classical studies that were championed by Petrarch demonstrates that the printing press was instrumental in furthering learning in Europe. Okay, so Bacon's command of classical studies, I might note here, he meant he praised the ancient Greeks. Okay, classical studies. In Bacon. And the thing is, I could polish this a little bit, but then it's a rough draft. Okay, so I don't want to polish this too much. So let's see. But then again, you know what? Y'all are wanting to see probably good writing here. So in praising the ancient Greeks, Bacon showed a command of the classical studies that were championed by Petrarch, demonstrating. But when you actually write it, don't put that much effort into your language, because you don't really get a lot of credit. You don't get any extra credit for flowery language. So with that, hopefully that's clear as far as just the basis of which you would set this up, that these documents are both being properly referred to. You notice that I'm referring to the authors by name, and that I'm also using them to support an argument that I've got here in my topic sentence for this paragraph. And with that, we're setting up not only the document points, but also setting this up for complex understanding. Okay, so let me just take a quick look at the chat here, and let's see. So remember, if there are any more questions coming in, go ahead and send those to me, and I'll go ahead and show you what I do for body paragraph 2, dealing with the Reformation. Okay, so what I would note here for body paragraph 2, the printing press has often been been cited as a causal factor for the Reformation. Okay, and it changed the religious life of Europeans. Okay, so what I would do here is I would start off with outside information. Okay, so I would start, actually, you know what? Okay, so I need to look here, and that's why I've got my T-chart set up here. So I've got Martin Luther, the 95 Theses. I've got Jan Hus, Tyndale, and then Trent. Okay, so what I'm gonna note here is before the invention of the printing press. Okay, with the printing press, Jan Hus. Okay, Jan Hus was burned as a heretic by the Catholic Church. Okay, so burned as a heretic by the Catholic Church. Now, for this one, I'm using documents, let's see, 2, 3, and 5, I believe. Okay, so 2, 3, and 5, just a note there. All right, by the Catholic Church. The church claimed that Huss was a dangerous heretic, and he and others like him had to be put to death. Okay, had to be put to death to save souls. Okay, to save souls basically from being led astray. So we've got document 2. Okay, and what we would do here is that this is where I would put in outside information. Okay, I would bring in that outside evidence. Now I should probably say OE or something like that, but old habits die hard. I tend to refer to it as outside information. All right, so we would put our outside information here about Martin Luther. Okay, so I would go into Martin Luther, and then I would go into William Tyndale. Okay, so I would put after the printing press, the printing press gave other reformers, such as William Tyndale, a platform from which to criticize the Catholic Church to a wide audience. Okay. Now, the thing is, I need to make a specific reference to the document. Okay. So this will answer your question here about that. I wouldn't just mention William Tyndale and say that he criticized the Catholic Church, that, in claiming that, in using scripture to claim that, Peter did not have special authority over the other apostles. So over the other apostles. He was challenging the authority of the Pope, okay, of the Pope, who claimed that his authority came from Jesus, came from Jesus through Peter. Now, the thing is, what I've done here is I've actually, given some explanation and background. So with this, I've actually kind of brought in, so this is document 3. But in this case, sometimes it's unavoidable. You do all this stuff at once. And really, what you need to think about is if you're doing this right, it will become seamless. Okay. Because what I've done here is I've actually, already brought in some background in the document. Okay. And in the context of that, so in here, I've already given some background into the document, some of the historical situation, but then I've also used the document to argue. So really, we can do all of these things kind of all at once. Okay. So I've got that document. And then finally, I have the Council of Trent. Okay. And what I would do here to argue here is that, although, we see here the Catholic Church, so the printing press did not alter the Catholic Church's attitude toward heresy, as the Council of Trent, declared. So I would put here that the Council of Trent, and it's okay to look back at the document so that I can see my annotations here. Okay. And so we see here that, they're banning the books of heretics. Okay. As the Catholic Church declared the work, so the Catholic Church banned books written by heretics in an attempt to continue to control religious doctrine. Okay. So what we see there, and we could even put that as possibly even a purpose. So, when we see that, that is Doc 5. Okay. So I'm going to focus on, how to do the analysis, but sometimes we do that unavoidably, sometimes even without even meaning to. So in this case, what I've got here is, once again, I've got a topic sentence. I've got some analysis, all of that kind of stuff. Let's see. So, we've got that. And then I'm going to put some outside information there, and we'll go into that. All right. So as far as that goes, that's body paragraph 2. Okay. So now that gives us one more body paragraph. Okay. So the printing press also allowed scholars. Okay. So allowed scholars to communicate with each other. Okay. Now, of course, one thing I want to note here is I could, really go into any kind of humanist, any humanist writers would be fair game here. Okay. So any humanist writers would be fair game here. If somebody, if they can be related to the printing press. Okay. If you could, if you mention, something like, Machiavelli's work was printed, it was very popular, that sort of thing, that people were reading that across Europe, so also allowed scholars to communicate with each other, which resulted in the scientific revolution. Okay, the scientific revolution. And so what we could do here is we start with Vesalius. Okay, so Andreas Vesalius. Vesalius performed experiments. Okay, so performed experiments on human cadavers. Okay, you don't have to, you could say dead human bodies or whatever. Performed experiments on human cadavers, which was still illegal, which was still illegal at the time, but helped to further knowledge of the human body. Okay, so and that's going to be document 4. Okay, which helped to further knowledge of the human body. Publishing, so human cadavers, and published. So I'm going to put here he published his works. His sketches in books, which were printed and distributed. Okay, which way published his sketches, of the human, of the human body structure and all of that kind of stuff. So you could note here his anatomy sketches. And so what we're doing there is we're not only noting that, okay, that's, human anatomy, it was illegal at the time, all of that kind of stuff, we're also noting that we've got that here. All right. So, help further knowledge the human body. And also, we could use the legality or some of that, help to further knowledge of the human body. All right. And so then we can go to that. And then what we'd see here as far as using the William Harvey document. Okay. So, what we see here, the monarchs are supporting this. Okay. So, we would note here that, absolute monarchs. Okay. So absolute monarchs supported, scientific research, believing that it would help. Actually, what I'm going to do here, that William Harvey. Let me actually save that one. Okay, so William Harvey. Let's see. So we've got here, according to the custom of the present age. Okay, so their life, the sovereign, the son of the microcosm, which the power depends. Okay, so what we would note here. Okay, that William Harvey. Okay, what I'm going to note here, because that would really be my analysis, what I was writing there. So William Harvey, in a printed book about the circulation of blood, Okay, printed book about the circulation of blood. We see here that he compared the circulation. He compared blood circulation and the heart with the role of a king ruling his country. Okay. And so we've got document 7 there. Okay. So with that, in a printed book about the circulation of blood, now in my analysis, I'll start doing some more of that argument because I can analyze basically how he's challenging ancient authorities, challenging the humoral theory of disease and all of that kind of stuff. So I'll save that analysis. But what you've got here are the foundations for 3 body paragraphs that are going to use the documents in order to make 3 distinct arguments that are going to support a thesis that the printing press greatly changed the lives of Europeans in terms of terms of furthering literacy, in terms of furthering the Reformation, and in terms of furthering the scientific revolution. And so what we have here are 4 and 7. Let me just wait a few minutes for any other questions that might present themselves. Let me go ahead and take a look and see what we've got here. All right. So we've got a few questions here. All right. So when you compare and contrast between documents, do you just support one another? Smoke bond, what you're going to do here is as long as you're putting the documents in conversation with each other, that's what's moving into that complex understanding point. The thing is, any kind of dialogue you put between the documents is going to be helpful. Okay. So whether you're comparing or contrasting, or you're using a support, now using the documents to support, now that's also corroboration. So the thing is, why I like to group the documents is, first of all, because it helps you make the argument and to use the documents argumentatively rather than just document 1 says, document 2 says, and all of that kind of stuff. And then as far as that goes, that also sets you up for complex understanding. When writing, no, don't write analysis and OI. This is a reminder for me that when I'm going to show y'all later, I'm going to go into these paragraphs and show you the finished product. So that's going to be important there. Yeah, don't actually write those things. What you want to do is, I'm reminding myself this is where I'm going to put this stuff in a later session. So I'm going to focus on in a session how to effectively use outside information, and in another session how to effectively employ point of view analysis and all of that, including outside information if it's related to the answer, or do we need to specifically cite documents in our body paragraph if you use their info. Michael, can you be a little more specific? Let's see. Can you be a little more specific, Michael? This is on a little bit of a delay. They're not getting this as soon as it comes out. But what I think Michael is saying here, in including outside information, do you need to? Okay. If you're saying that now I think outside information, I will talk about that in another session, but sometimes I refer to outside information as document 8 because you can refer to a historical document that's not there. Oh my Lord, 7-0 lead Dodgers, had to check. All right. So looks like, the Cubs may have something in them. Cubs fans are notoriously optimistic. So we'll see how this goes, but it looks like the Dodgers are ready to go to the World Series for the first time since '88, when I originally fell in love with the team, and they've disappointed me for 28 years ever since. Okay, let's see here. I'm not getting any more questions there. Okay, so should we use? Okay. You don't necessarily, we'll talk about that in the outside information session. I would use it a lot like a document. I would refer to something, but we'll go into that. Okay. I'll go into how to effectively, I would effectively, use outside information. Okay. All right. Well, at least hopefully y'all learned something this evening. Jordan and Jennifer, do y'all have anything else y'all might want to contribute? Any other questions or anything else to contribute? All right. So y'all let me know. But yeah, we will address. I mean, I want to do one thing. Now, one thing that I'm going to note, this is the longest broadcast. I don't think it's going to get longer from here because we're basically setting up what we're going to do in future broadcasts. So, what we've done tonight is going to make other sessions more efficient. So if there's no other discussion, we'll get to, watching the ball game, or else, if the Cubs fans that are here are going to cry themselves to sleep, and we will then get ready for other sessions that are coming up. Again, this is the longest of the broadcasts. Okay, so it's not going to get any longer than this, but we've got all of the ground laid. So thank y'all very much. Glad I could help y'all this evening. And let's see, clarification. Yes, I will. Yes, yeah. The thing is, I'm sorry if I confused anyone by that. It'll make sense. The 8-month writing clinic is a process. And then this is the first year after the revision. So normally I'd be able to tell you, watch this archived video or something like that. But in this case, we got that. Michael, I'm glad you like the T-chart. That's really the biggest thing for me as far as organizing an essay. If you want to write an essay that's going to get a 7 or a 7, I think a T-chart is a must. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a wonderful night, and hopefully, Cubs fans, y'all be pulling for us against the Yankees in the World Series. We can only hope. And I will see y'all next month. It's always a pleasure.